Hello, welcome to Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century. I'm your host, Larry Mendoza.
And I'm Rick Wingrove.
And today we have a wonderful show, a great show. I'm glad you guys could join us. We have Pastor Jerry DeWitt, who will be joining us on Skype. And for those of you who don't know, Jerry is a former evangelical pastor turned atheist. And we'll be talking to him about his book, his past career, his deconversion, and things along those lines. But before we get started, I want to mention a couple things. Check us out on Facebook, on YouTube, and we also now have a Twitter account. The Twitter account is hashtag Road2Reason. And send us messages, comments, like us, tell your friends, send us ideas for shows, guests you would like to see, things along those lines. Additionally, we would like some contribution support. We want to make the show better. We want to make it the best it can be, but we need, help, and we can get help in many ways. Number one, you can send a check or money order to Fairfax Public Access, care of Road to Reason, and producer Paul Sheehan at 2929-S Eskridge, E-S-K-R-I-D-G-E Road, Fairfax, Virginia 22031. But also, contribution can come in a form of volunteers. So if you guys are local and would like to get into media and TV, you can come in, take some classes here at Public Access. It's a great facility. You can learn a lot of things, and you can help us out with the show. We need hands on deck here. All right, so having said that,
we're also, by the way, if I may interject, we're also looking for an additional female host for the show. It's a little male heavy around here right now, so send us an email and come on the show.
All right, so having said that, Rick, do you have any announcements and news?
A couple of items kind of in the news. American Atheist Annual Convention 2014 is going to be in Salt Lake City, right in the heart of Mormon country. So that's going to be interesting. However, it's presenting some problems. American Atheist for the past few years has been putting up billboards in cities where they're having conventions or any other events to kind of let people know we're coming, but also to spread the message that, we are here to support you if you are an atheist, you're struggling to come out. We're here, and it's okay to be an atheist. And so the current billboard campaign that they want to do in Salt Lake City has kind of run aground because they can't find anybody that will rent them a billboard anywhere around Salt Lake City. They're afraid of the church, basically. So this is basically the pressure from the church, or just the influence of the church, is causing a blackout on free speech if you're an atheist in Salt Lake City leading up to the convention. Hopefully that can get resolved, but as of right now, they just can't get a billboard. Also, upcoming on November 6th, which is a Wednesday, I believe, the Supreme Court is going to be taking up the case. It will be hearing oral arguments about Greece, New York, their public prayer in public meetings case that is now going before the Supreme Court. And there will be oral arguments. And as a result, American Atheists and Americans United for the Separation of Church and State will be rallying in front of the Supreme Court that day. Also local groups, Beltway Atheists, Nova Atheists, and we hope some others will join us there. We're sure they will. To rally in front of the Supreme Court to show that we are present, we're concerned about this, and we think that government entities have no business injecting religion into their proceedings. Prayer is the practice of religion, and so the Supreme Court is going to decide on that, and the way things look right now, you never know how they're going to go. We hope for the worst, or we expect the worst, hope for the best. Yeah. So if you're off work on the 6th, come down and join us. It should be fun.
Yeah, and I'd also like to mention, this affects everybody. I mean, prayer in public places really can give you the feeling, if you go to a Board of Supervisors meeting, for example, like Rick and I went, and actually over the past few years to kind of argue with the Board of Supervisors about, Christmas displays and things like that. And they always start off with a Christian prayer, and it always makes us feel like, okay, well then, automatically we're shut out of that conversation as atheists. So
well, what's disheartening about this is that the Obama administration has provided an amicus brief, I believe it's called, to the court in support of this, to allow local governments to begin their proceedings with supposedly non-sectarian, but in real practice, this almost always is a sectarian situation. For instance, in Loudoun County, where we've both been to those meetings, they're 100% Christian Board of Supervisors. They're not there to support or endorse Islam or Hinduism or anything else, or atheists. They're there to endorse and promote Christianity.
Absolutely, and I mean, and that's the thing, and it's not even a fair, it would be one thing if they were saying a moment of silence, or maybe to just kind of have a generic maybe prayer. No, they invoke Jesus Christ. It's clearly Christian, and it's clearly one-sided. And they obviously want to shut everybody else out, essentially.
Okay.
But anyway, so
we apparently have Jerry DeWitt with us now by Skype. Hi, Jerry. Can you hear us? You may be on mute because we can't hear you.
Well,
there you are.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
We can now.
Good deal, good deal.
All right. Glad we got this working.
Thanks for joining us today, Jerry.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we try to get our show. I don't know if you've heard of our show, Road to Reason. We've had some pretty interesting guests, and we've actually had in the past Catherine Dunphy, the executive director of the Clergy Project. So anyway, but thank you for joining us. So let's start the conversation. So let's start at the beginning with you. You were always a Christian, correct? Born and raised?
Correct. Well, technically I was raised around the church, but I had my salvation experience at age 17 at Jimmy Swiggert's church in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Wow, what a place to start.
Isn't it?
So you are in the Bible Belt, huh?
Was that prior to his episodes in the motel with the hookers?
It was just 5 months, unfortunately. It happened very close to my salvation experience, and may have had. I didn't add this in the book, but it may have had somewhat to do with my journey. I truly was very shaken by some. I saw Swaggart as a giant among religionists, and I knew that I was a normal 17-year-old young man who had issues with the flesh, as we referred to it at the time. And so to see someone of his caliber still struggling and even falling so publicly, it gave me a lot to think about, needless to say.
Let's see. So, Jerry, you have a new book out called Hope After Faith, which is a chronicle of your passage through this transition.
Yes.
And I understand you also. So you run. So you're on the Speakers Bureau for the Clergy Project, correct? Is that?
That's correct. I'm a board member for the Clergy Project.
Board member,
that's
right?
Correct. Yeah,
okay.
and on the Speakers Bureau. The Clergy Project is doing wonderfully, as a matter of fact. The latest statistics we now have over 511 members in the Clergy.
Wow,
that's
yeah.
amazing.
Last time I heard it was 200. That's amazing.
It is absolutely fabulous to watch the growth.
The first time I even heard of the Clergy Project was just prior to the 2011 American Atheist Conference here in Washington, or in Bethesda. And normally I go to the conventions to see the science talks. That's my main interest. But something caught my attention. I stayed in the room and started listening, especially with Teresa McBain, when she was up there, and it was the most dramatic thing I've ever seen at one of these conventions. It was just to realize there's an organization out there for people who have found themselves in your situation was something. Can you talk about that a little?
Sure. That became known as the Year of the Ex-Preacher.
Right.
and there were several of us. I came out, and then Mike Ouse came out, who actually has Houston Oasis. And then of course Teresa very dramatically came out at the American Atheist Convention, and so it was a phenomenal experience, not only to presently experience being actually in the auditorium, but I think to be in the movement at this particular time and to experience how the demographics are changing. There are more and more, ex-ministers that are joining the movement. And in my case in particular, you can see the movement having great effects deeper and deeper into the Deep South. We've got a very large group just less than an hour from the Gulf. And so this is a fabulous time to be involved.
So can you explain a little bit about the Clergy Project? I know we've done a show on this before, but in your view, so the Clergy Project, what exactly is it for a viewer so that they know and maybe help contribute?
Sure. What I always like to say is two things. One, if anyone wants to interview in regards to the Clergy Project, or if they just want much better information than what I could give, they need to contact Catherine, and they can do that through the Clergy Project website, clergyproject.org. But from my perspective, as a board member, I see the Clergy Project as a fantastic community. It's a very intimate community at the moment. You have to be vetted in order to be part of the Clergy Project, and we're not into proselytizing. We don't see ourselves as being evangelical, trying to deconvert ministers in any way. This is truly a humanitarian act where we are trying to be a support group for people that have really gone unsupported in many cases because of the uniqueness of their situation. If you are a minister who no longer believes, there is almost no one in your world that you can trust to tell that new fact to. And so we've created an online forum where everyone is anonymous, and it gives them the freedom and the flexibility to express this realization about themselves without endangering
Jerry,
their
can I
life.
stop you there for a minute? Can you, you got your hand kind of in the way of the camera, and our viewers can't really see you.
Oh, I didn't know you could even see me. I would have been looking at the camera the entire time.
Yes, we can see you, and your hand kind of was in the way. But
It kept going higher and higher for me to be able to get to my mic.
Okay, our producer's also going to want you to stop rocking in the chair, because he jumps in my case about once a week for doing that. So,
Well, if I'd had any idea that y'all had the video working now, I would have been still and would have been looking at the camera. So I apologize.
now, if I may say one more thing, you might want to move the microphone just a hair closer to you now, too.
I will try to. Is that any better at all?
that's
That's
good.
a little
That
better,
works.
yeah.
Okay, a little
all right,
better.
now.
Good.
We've been struggling with technical problems all morning, not the least of which you could store meat in this room. It's so cold in here. So,
Oh, no.
yeah. So, anyway, moving on.
Yeah.
All right, back to the
That's
Clergy
the
Project.
problem I usually run into. Usually everywhere I go, it's entirely too warm. You would think, being from the South, that when I would go north, that I would end up freezing to death. But inevitably, I end up where no one has ever heard of an air conditioner. So I'm always hot.
Right. So, the Clergy Project, I mean, it just kind of boggles my mind what this is. When you think about it, what this really is, these are people who've been utterly immersed at the highest levels, if that's not too mixed a metaphor, in religion, and have just slowly somehow come to a realization. Can you talk a little bit about your first glimmer of doubt about this till the first time you used the word atheist?
Well, it took many, many years for me to get to that place. What's important to understand is that I fought becoming an atheist, for lack of better words. I fought it kicking and screaming the entire time. I didn't really know that I was heading towards atheism. I sensed towards the very end that I was at least becoming agnostic. But this starts in a much slower form of transitioning, of maybe moving from denomination to denomination, moving from one side of the Christian spectrum to another. I started off an extremely, extremely conservative person, and by the end of my ministry was very liberal. Not only liberal theologically, but I was very liberal socially. And so this is a dialogue that you're having with yourself over your core values and the very structure of your belief system. And for me, it happened over years. But the very first issue that I ran into was actually very young, at age 17, when it became my responsibility to preach the doctrine of hell and eternal punishment. And that was something that I struggled to reconcile with my image of an all-loving God. If there was an all-loving God, then why allow the creation of hell in the first place? So that was the very beginning. And then all the way to the end, it was really, and the best way I can describe it, it's as if my faith was a pot of boiling water whenever I started my journey at 17. But every time that I would ask a question and it would be answered in any way other than literal interpretation of the Bible, it was as if I was turning the temperature down on that pot. And so it wasn't as much suddenly there was this, last straw, as it were. It was more of an awakening or a realization that my water of faith had become room temperature, and I had not really realized it. So it was the biggest struggle for me was not accepting my atheism. The biggest struggle for me was accepting that I was no longer going to have a place in Christian ministry, because I had already reconciled myself to the idea that I was going to have to be a very dissatisfied minister, because I didn't know any other way to communicate with the world. I didn't know any other way to share my humanistic values. I didn't know that there was a secular movement, or that I could even become a humanist celebrant. I didn't know any of those options existed. So the idea that I struggled with the most was not being a non-believer, but it was actually being out of the ministry. That was the part I was struggling with. I thought, for lack of better words, being a non-believing minister was just the cross I would have to bear.
Right, and so, it's interesting because I've known a lot of people who, were raised religious and then kind of, transitioned out. Some people, it happened very quickly, as it probably was in my case, relatively quickly anyway. It happened over maybe 2 or 3 years, but I was raised Catholic. And in Italy, so obviously I was in that branch of religion. But Catholics, it's almost like Christian light in some ways, in some. But I know other friends of mine that have actually went through a transition from being very evangelistic, very fundamentalist in a way, and they started doubting. And one of the biggest fears and one of the biggest concerns that they had was the fact that they would lose family, friends. And that's just from just being a member. I can only imagine what it would be like for a pastor, minister of I'm assuming a pretty big church, to come out one day and just have to give that up. I mean, is that, and I guess my question to you is, how did people react when you kind of left the ministry?
Yes, so I was fortunate in some ways. When I joined the Clergy Project and I began to communicate with other ministers, I felt like I was in a perfect scenario to begin to move towards the secular movement or the secular lifestyle. And the reason I thought that is because my wife and I had never had an issue over theology. We affectionately referred to her as an atheist. She just really didn't care one way or the other, and actually did not enjoy being married to a minister. So she found a momentary relief in me moving away from the ministry. But on top of that, I had stopped pastoring. I'd been out of the pulpit for several months, maybe over a year as far as being a pastor. I was still taking preaching opportunities. Having been in the ministry for 25 years, I was constantly being called to hold revival services or special services or to fill in as a guest minister. And I was taking fewer and fewer of those opportunities. So whenever I connected with Clergy Project members that were still having to address a congregation every Wednesday and Sunday, I thought, due to my secular job and my wife's, my life situation with my wife, that I really thought I was going to dodge a bullet. I really thought that I was going to get away with this. I honestly did. And my idea was not to do what I ultimately had to do, which was commit identity suicide. My idea was to commit identity starvation, that I would stay with this secular job, I would take less and less preaching opportunities, and over a course of what I knew would take years, I would become less known as the pastor or the minister and more known as someone else. But certain events happened and the whole thing sped up, and I ended up having to be very public about it, commit identity suicide. So when I did do that, I didn't have a congregation that I was pastoring at the time to lose, but that didn't keep me from losing the friendships and, in some ways, more importantly, the respect that I still held in the eyes of people that I had pastored. And so, along with losing family and friends, and of course, ultimately finances, because on December the 1st, 2011, I was fired from my secular job due to really the outcry of people in the community. I also then lost the favor that I had gained with religious and non-religious people over the course of an adult life. And in some ways, that was one of the harder parts to take.
Real quick, so you said you got fired from your secular job because of an outcry of the community, because of your coming out and losing
Yes.
your faith. Did you try to take any kind of legal, I mean, because is that even, you just decided to just give it up, I guess?
Yeah, so very quickly, the situation was, I, as an evangelist, every time that I got without a place to preach, I'd go get a job. And whenever then I get the call to a revival, I've quit more good jobs than most people will ever have in order to go in, stay in the ministry. So I built up a little bit of experience through the years, and had worked at City Hall in my town for about 5 years. So when I stopped pastoring, I took a sales job. I did that for about a year, and then I took a job as a building official for what would become my best friend. It's a very, very competitive market for many reasons we won't go into here. But what's important to understand is that the people he held contracts with, when they found out that I was no longer a believer, they threatened his contracts and told him that if he did not do something with me, that they would not renew his contracts, or at least insinuated that would be the case. And more than likely, that would have been the case. And so he felt like he had to fire me. I did not sue him for a couple of reasons. One was, I had no idea at that moment how disenfranchised I would ultimately end up with my community. So I was still trying to save my place in the community as much as I could. The other thing was, I also didn't know that my wife would ultimately leave over all of this. And she asked me in the very beginning not to sue because it would have only, made the situation that much more dramatic.
Yeah, one thing I've taken away from talking to various pastors about this is that one of the biggest hurdles you have, and you touched on it, was that you're part of a social structure that, with your friends, your family, everything's tied up in it. And when you arrive at this decision, or this revelation, or however you want to put it, when you become an atheist and you're in the pulpit, your life is going to change. Sure. And it's almost inevitable. It's certainly inevitable that you're going to lose friends. I know that some people I've asked, you're on this journey of discovery. Was your wife on the same journey of discovery? And usually not, because the wife was the former first lady, essentially, of this certain local social structure. So there's a lot of upheaval, but your experience with your wife was somewhat different than
right.
usual.
It was a little different because she did not want to be in the ministry in the first place, and so that caused a huge amount of friction in our marriage. So it was only compounded whenever now the minister that had this public persona was now somewhat infamous. It was one thing to be famous in our little pond, but now to be infamous was even worse. And so there was much more public attention than what someone as private as she was able to handle. But you're right. As the minister, your place in your local tribe is very, very solidified. As the minister, even if you're attending a family reunion or a Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas or whatever, you're seen as that minister. And you're going to be the one that's asked to pray. You're going to be the one that's asked for counsel. So this isn't like going to the plant, putting in your 8 hours, clocking out, and coming home and doing something else. You are a minister 24 hours a day, and that's one reason why statistically there's a huge amount of burnout in career ministers.
Right.
Yeah.
So we want to chat more here, but we got to take a quick break. And before we do, I do want to ask our viewers to call in, ask any questions for Jerry or any other topic, and we'll see you back in a couple of minutes. Or maybe not.
So,
okay.
or maybe not. Technical glitch kind of day.
Oh no, I'm sorry to hear that.
To better care for our home so that we never have to leave. NASA has a fleet of satellites around the planet that keeps track of climate change and studies how humans are affecting the planet. NASA has a ton of geniuses, and all of them are working for a future that has a healthy Earth in it. Like when NASA helped find the hole in our ozone layer so we could fix it before the problem got out of control, NASA is doing its part. We have to do ours. This is our home. To learn more about how NASA is keeping an eye on Earth, visit www.nasa.gov/Earth.
When I was younger, I didn't want to admit I had a serious disease. Because of my diabetes, I lost the sight in my left eye. Misconceptions continue to surround this monster public health issue. But the simple truth is, diabetes can often be prevented and complications avoided. You're not alone. Understand the realities of diabetes and know that you can manage it and lead a full, active life.
There's an alarming trend in the world today. Everywhere you go, people are saying that cinema is dead. But cinema is not dead. My name is Count Simon Gauntley, and on my television program, Count Gauntley's Horrors from the Public Domain, I make it my mission to resurrect forgotten film classics. I promise to dredge the sewers and ford the stagnant streams of film history to ensure that no film is truly lost to the ages. Count Gauntley and FPA, keeping cinema alive! Alive! Alive!
Well, even though Joseph's been gone 18 months, we've made the decision to keep all his things as they were when he was here last. I finally just packed his toothbrush away like 6 months ago. It had been sitting on the counter in the bathroom. And I was cleaning the bathroom one day and I just thought, okay, it's time to put the toothbrush in the medicine cabinet.
So, I just moved in with his family, and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I was born and I knew how to use the litter box. Look at that! That's disgusting! Oh, poop already! You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
Okay, we're back. I'm Rick Wingrove here with Larry Mendoza. Our guest today is Jerry DeWitt. Jerry, just before we went away, asked you about some of the social upheaval. Another big thing is that many preachers, it's not that they're smart people, it's just this is all they've ever done, and it's not always a good fit for jobs that are available out in the real world. So, but you sounded like you worked all the way along and didn't really have that particular problem, but a lot of preachers do.
Yeah, I don't think that I've had, I don't think I've had the problem that some ministers have had. In some ways, some members of the Clergy Project are better off than I am, because the particular form of Pentecostalism that I belong to discouraged higher education. And so I do not possess a theological degree or anything that I could transfer towards counseling or teaching, some of the other careers that are a pretty easy fit for an ex-minister. But I do have a really good resume because of the other job that I have had. Now, what's unfortunate is that most of those jobs are public relations oriented jobs, and so it takes a pretty unique circumstance now in the era of Google in order to find a company that is able to tolerate the last 2 years of my Google history.
Okay.
Yeah, that's something that when Catherine was there, she was talking about. Part of what the Clergy Project does is help people who don't have any other skills to kind of find jobs and reintegrate into society, and kind of help them transition. So it's great that you at least have had some experience. You didn't seem to have much trouble. So in that point, like, what are you doing now? I know you're on the board of. For the Clergy Project, you've written a book. I mean, you're keeping pretty busy, huh?
I am staying pretty busy, and I actually do have a new non-movement related job. I teach continuing education classes to architects and engineers, and so I've just started that. And it's something that it'll take a few months for it to build up and become a sustainable income, but it is something that's given me a little direction and given me some hope of some financial stability. And so, of course, I'm still touring with the book. I'm involved with the podcast Dogma Debate. And of course, I'm also a board member on Foundation Beyond Belief, and a big supporter of Be Secular. So I've always got more activities than what I'm probably able to manage or to be good at.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
Yeah, that's the way it goes around here. Jerry, I was at Austin this year for the American Atheist Convention, and I saw your Sunday morning sermon, and I want you to say something about that. But first, there's a story I've told, I think, on this show before. One of the most surreal events of my entire life was at Bethesda. This is the day after Reason Rally. And we were having American Atheist Convention over in Bethesda. And I talked to Ernest Pierce. He said, "Hey, we're doing a taping. Come down and watch." So I grabbed a Corona from the bar. I walked in the room down there and watched you and Ernest Pierce and Richard Haynes having a dogma battle. All the three of you guys were channeling this stuff and throwing your different denominations at each other. It was one of the most hilarious and surreal things I have ever seen.
It was a huge amount of fun, and it was enjoyable to be in a discussion where we could actually defend our previous religious beliefs without the fear that there would be some type of eternal consequence.
Right. So now you're doing the Sunday morning services, or the one at Austin. Is that like what you're doing now with the Sunday morning services?
It's really not. Austin was a little exaggerated, and any time that I do it like that, it's somewhat exaggerated. What we do is once a month we meet and we we just simply call ourselves Community Mission Chapel. We consider ourselves to be a secular congregation, not an atheist church, as the media loves to say it.
Right.
But what we do is we have a secular sermon, for a lack of better words, and we incorporate throughout the service music, secular music, that carries with it our secular values and somehow emphasizes whatever the point of the motivational speech is that particular day. But our sermons are more like motivational talks, but they're not nearly as over the top as what you saw in Austin or even in D.C.
Well, that one, I saw you in the hallway right after that, and I said, Jerry, you took me back, because I was raised in the Southern Baptist Church, right. And I'm not sure where the Southern Baptists and the Pentecostalists are on the out there scale, but they're probably pretty close. But it was a lot the same style, the biblical literalism kind of feel to it.
Yeah. Sure. Well, that's that style in particular has a very long history, and it goes all the way back to the orators, within the origin of Greek philosophy, and it's been around a long time. It carries its way even into our presidential debates, thanks to PA systems. Politicians don't have to yell out over the crowd like they once did, but this particular style has very, very deep roots in our culture, and those roots are still very present in the Deep South. It's something that is not only expected, but it's something that has kind of developed into a nostalgic need, and so that was the reason I entertained the idea of a secular congregation, because people were commenting, sometimes complimenting on that preaching style, that it gave them a sense of closure, or that it did seem to help them or fulfill something in their lives. So, we're trying to meet needs where we find them.
It's funny. I mean, you said that the media calls it atheist church and this, that, and the other. But I've also heard, I believe it's Ken Ham and other people along those lines kind of criticizing this. And I don't know. I'm sure you probably heard some of those criticisms. And they are also calling it, they're starting an atheist church because deep inside, atheists really need to, that. What's your response to that?
Yeah, the reality of it is that yes, atheists do have needs deep inside, because atheists, believe it or not, are actually human beings, and human being needs, and those needs are other human beings. That's what we need. We're social creatures, and so this type of service meets those social needs in a very unique way, and honestly, in a way that has become expected because of the culture that we come out of. And so it's kind of a shortcut to meeting those needs in a very effective way. Now, from a religious perspective, they immediately think that this need is, a God-sized hole in the human soul. But that's a meme that started with them. Yeah. It's really just part of being a human being and experiencing life.
Right.
I guess when your only tool is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail, I guess.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah, and I think every time there is a preacher or pastor that deconverts to atheism, there seems to be a lot of backlash from the Christian community. It's like, and I've noticed, I think, I'm following you on Facebook and I think and other places, I think, and I have seen many people, I guess, that maybe knew you or didn't know you, but say, one day we hope you come back. And, I guess, do you get that a lot? I mean, do you often, I guess you touched on it a little bit, but on a day-to-day basis, past people from your congregation, or just random people that hear about you now because you've become so, kind of, as you said, infamous and as a pastor that, rebelled against God, so to speak.
Yes, I do get that regularly, and honestly, I appreciate it for how it's meant. It is a little bit of a blow off, it keeps the person from having to dig into my story or really investigate and then answer the questions that my life proposes. But at the same time, I prefer that over Christians who just write me off and say either I never was a believer in the first place, which is one of the most insulting accusations, or secondly that I'm destined for hell and there's no reversal. So at least this is a somewhat more compassionate alternative that they're anticipating.
Jerry, there are probably, if you got 500 people now, there's probably many times more people out there struggling with these problems, totally isolated. They don't know who to talk to. Like you didn't have anybody to talk to. Who can they talk to? How can they get in touch with you and get along on this process? I think we seem to have lost. We lost Jerry.
We lost Jerry.
We're going to try to get him back.
Yes.
In the meantime, I want to do a little song.
There he is.
Oh, there's Jerry. You're back. We lost you.
We had lost you for a minute.
So anyway, how does somebody get in touch with you if they are struggling with the same problem?
Well, what I would suggest is anyone who wants to contact me personally, they can go to jerrydewitt.net.
Well, actually, I mean not you personally, but how do they get in contact with the Clergy Project and other organizations?
Right. The Clergy Project is clergyproject.org. And if they go to the Clergy Project website, they're going to find all of the ways to connect that they need, and even more so. But this is something that I do think the movement has done very well. Is there are lots of sources, lots and lots of resources for people, even if you're not ex-clergy or clergy closeted, clergy.
Oh, you seem to have lost him again.
Frozen again.
Hold on.
We'll have him back in just a minute, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, I think
have I lost you?
Oh, there you are.
Oh, there you are.
Okay.
I don't know how I keep losing you.
Yeah, not sure
Somebody's playing tricks with it? No.
You must have really made somebody really angry upstairs, Jerry.
That's very possible.
Yeah.
If there is someone upstairs, I wouldn't be surprised if he's not happy with me.
But you were talking about how to get in touch with the Clergy Project, and there's other organizations, obviously. I think
Sure.
Richard Dawkins Foundation is a big supporter. I think they can go through them as well.
Yes, recovering from religion.
Right.
If someone sees themselves, if they're not part of ministry, recovering from religion seems to have a lot of the same resources that the Clergy Project has, but for the non-minister. Mm-hmm. Almost every group that I run into now has some type of support side as far as forums or meetups. So, I'm actually always surprised when I connect with a new person, especially if I connect with them like over Facebook, mm-hmm. and they say to me, I don't know any other non-believers, and I'm like, really? Just
you do. You just don't know who they are.
Yeah,
that's right.
And just a small Google search will open up a whole world of believers. It's been a wonderful service that I've been able to provide, mm-hmm. having met so many people over the last year that someone will Facebook me and they'll say, "Do you know of any non-believers in such and such area?" And with one quick Facebook post, they instantly become connected to dozens, of people that they wouldn't have known otherwise.
Well, you speak their language. You can burrow right into their fears and how they're really looking at it.
I think so, yes.
Yeah, and what's interesting is, mentioning, not knowing if there's other atheists around. I think the internet, first of all, has done an amazing thing at putting the atheist community together, and I think it's been integral. It's been, without the internet, what we have been able to accomplish would have taken us probably a lot longer.
Well, but it's the social structure that it's allowed us to create.
And one thing is, we just recently had Edwina Rogers here, who's the executive director of now not only the Richard Dawkins Foundation, but Secular Coalition. And she managed to find in every single state atheist groups to join the Secular Coalition. So now we have representative in every state. So there are resources out there for everybody who they need a support. I mean, we have a local group here, Beltway Atheists Incorporated, and we have a meetup called Nova Atheists that people can come. And it's mostly social. We do some activism and things like that. But yeah, we are there. We're everywhere. And it's just a matter of, clicking on the internet.
How good is our progress if we can have a meetup with over 1,100 members in Oklahoma City?
Yes, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So you're in Louisiana, correct?
Correct.
So how's the atheist movement down there? I mean, is it growing?
Yes, it's very good. My first experience with the atheist movement in Louisiana was with the New Orleans Secular Humanist Association, NOSHA. And they're a very large group, very active group. And then from there, I learned that in Lake Charles, which is a much smaller town, but not nearly as small as the one that I live in, just an hour south of me, they've got a very strong online presence of free thinkers, hundreds of members, and in their meetups and turnouts, they have a good showing, and so that's in an extremely religious community. Mm-hmm. So everywhere from Lake Charles, which is only about an hour from the Texas line, if that far, maybe even half that, all the way to the east side to New Orleans, Louisiana has multiple groups that are active and growing. Matter of fact, it's out in Louisiana. Zach Copley is able to represent the scientific point of view and fight against creationism, and he's done that nationally, if not internationally. And that, he comes straight out of Louisiana doing so. So Louisiana is definitely holding its own and making a very, very strong impression.
Good.
Yeah.
South.
Good.
Jerry, we're going to take a phone call from Ellen. Ellen, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Go ahead.
Hi, Jerry. I'm fascinated by your story. What I'm really interested in is what gave you the courage to come out?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question, Ellen. I appreciate that. First off, I seldom consider myself to be courageous. What I've said for now almost 2 years is I'm no more courageous than the person who wakes up with his house on fire and jumps out of a second-story window. This is this is something that I felt like I had to do. In the beginning, as I stated earlier, I was going to commit identity starvation, and I was just going to try to ease into a new life and be known by a different identity in the community. But once I posted a picture of me and my son with Professor Richard Dawkins, and people figured out who that was, and the story began to spread, I then jumped ahead of it. I went ahead and began to go along with the outing process. But what gave me, I think, if I had any courage, what did give me courage is that I realized the only reason not to do this was for fear of rejection. And I could no longer live with that. I realized that I had lived as a people pleaser for 42 years at that point, and that it had not really brought me the satisfaction in life that I was looking for. And because I was such a professional people pleaser, it really had not made the people I was trying to please very happy, because I was trying to please everybody all the time. And so realizing that rejection was really my biggest fear, I just came to a moment in life where I could no longer succumb to that fear.
Great.
Yeah, that's interesting. Alan, do you have anything else for us?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks for calling in.
Thanks. So I have a question. You were talking right before Alan called about creationism and evolution. And I understand that there has been a lot of movement down in Louisiana, especially with things like taxpayer-funded private schools that are teaching things like creationism. And are you, or I know there's people involved, but are you directly involved in lobbying against that, or?
Yeah, I'm not at the moment. Zach seems to be doing very well and is leading a very strong movement down here on our behalf.
Zach being?
Copeland. Zach Copeland. And a good bit of my inactivity in Louisiana is because of not being in Louisiana that much over the last 2 years. I've been on the road so much. But there definitely is a very serious problem in the political system in Louisiana. And of course it originates with our governor, Bobby Jindal, and apparently his desire to be president of the United States. And so I'm glad that there are people like Zach who are being somewhat successful and at least bringing awareness to the rest of the country that this is happening.
Am I mistaken, or does Bobby Jindal actually have a degree in biology?
He does.
And yet he's pushing creationism, even in light of the fact that Edwards v. Aguilar, 1987, United States Supreme Court, forbade the teaching of creationism in schools because it's religion, it's not science. Science is what scientists do, and creationism isn't it. And that was a Louisiana case. Yeah. And yet they just ignore it and continue on.
Yeah, I think we underestimate, well, maybe we don't underestimate it, but maybe we let it slip our minds from time to time, the power of politics and the way in which political motivations reshape our landscape on a regular basis. If we look back through humanistic history, secular history, we've been far more secular in our past than what we are now. But most creationists, thus most Christians or religionists, they wouldn't believe that. They would think that we're more secular now than we've ever been, because politics is continuously reshaping the landscape through its propaganda to meet its own purposes. And so that's another soapbox I could stand on for a while.
Absolutely. Let me ask you something just to go back a little bit. I just got to say, in your evolution, your transition from hard believer to hard non-believer, you talked about, I believe you said something about how you were in isolation, and I think this is very common. You basically had no one to talk to. Right. So that, all I can say about that is my hat's off to anybody who can struggle through these issues alone without really knowing that there is any backup or any resources available, and arrive at what we see as the correct solution, the correct answer.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think
it is extremely difficult when you live in such an isolated world and you have such an isolated mindset. My original fear was that I was being deceived by Satan. Literally thought that I was running the risk by entertaining these thoughts many years ago, by entertaining these thoughts that I was going to become deceived, and that the Bible verses would be fulfilled, that God would give me over to a reprobate mind, that He would sear my conscience as with a hot iron. And so there was a lot of fear in that. Then later on, once I got past those superstition fears, I had to ask myself, am I just engaged in some form of self-sabotage? Because at the height of my religious career, I was pastoring a decent-sized church here in the South. I was making good money from doing so. I was at the same time had a political career and was working at City Hall as the mayor's chief of staff and the director of community service. We had just moved into a beautiful home, and so everything was going our way. And so to question these things with full knowledge that they could jeopardize everything that we worked so hard for, I had to overcome the concern that this was some form of self-sabotage.
Right. Yeah, it's I mean, it's.
Yeah, I can see how it would be prone to a lot of self-doubt until you've gotten a certain distance along that path. But and I know there is at least one Bible verse, and I don't have it at hand, where it says that doubt is the one unforgivable sin. And the consequences of that are pretty dire. I mean, it's the most dire possible consequences in the universe. So
Sure.
that's a big thing to overcome.
It is. It's a huge thing to overcome, and you're taught from the very beginning of your religious experience that doubt is inevitable. That this is the great fight. That's why whenever you're trying to give accolades to a believer, you reference back to the Apostle Paul, where he says he fought a good fight, that he had kept the faith. And so you're already preconditioned to deal with doubt. And so doubt isn't, for doubt to be created within your belief system, that's not a surprise. You're expecting that. You're expecting that Satan is going to interject into your life some piece of information or some experience that causes you to be curious or to even have concerns and ultimately doubts. And so you're conditioned from day one that this is what you have to struggle against, this is what you have to fight against. So to overcome that is asking a lot of any individual in one lifetime.
Right, and I want to, I have a story, a quick story. When I was in college here in Virginia, in Richmond, I went to Virginia Commonwealth University, and I was one of the co-founders of the only secular group on campus to kind of balance out, well, not really even balance out, because there were countless Christian groups. But there was one Christian group, and I can't remember the name, that was on campus, student-led group, and they would have a lunchtime talk or discussion called Reasonable Christianity or something like that. So of course, us being the atheists that we are, decided to come to these meetings to actually bring, I guess, reason into the conversation. But one of the things that this young lady that was there, we started talking about things like doubt and things like that, and why you need Jesus. And you could tell how perturbed she was, because she goes, I could still remember her nervousness. I have all these thoughts in my head, these impure thoughts. I have to have Jesus in my life, because otherwise I'm going to go to hell. It's almost like she was so afraid, because she can't stop, maybe sexual thoughts or things along those lines. So it's very hard to overcome these obstacles.
Yeah. It is. It's what you're, in some cases, what you're asking people to do is to really overcome themselves. Some of my earliest memories are of me laying my head in my grandmother's lap with a throbbing earache and listening to her speak in other tongues as she prayed for me. Mm-hmm. And so that literally wired my brain. That made me who I am today. And so much of what I struggle with today, I didn't pick up last week or last month or last year. This is me. This is my personality. This is my physiology. This is my neurology. And so when it's so absolutely integrated into a young lady's thought patterns that these types of thoughts will send her to hell, her ability to try to overcome that herself forces her to give her reliance to something higher than her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Jerry, we're almost out of time. We got about
what a shame
30 seconds. Yeah, what's next for you? What's next?
Yeah, so next for me is continuing to have the book tour, and also it's in audio, and I narrated the book, so please send people that direction. But really, what's next for me is reestablishing some semblance of a normal life, and then finding my place in the secular movement from there.
Okay,
Jerry, it's been a wonderful pleasure having you on our show. You've given us some great insight.
I can't believe an hour's gone already. This has been great.
That is amazing. Yeah. I saw looking at the camera at the beginning.
The name of the book is Hope After Faith by Jerry DeWitt, former Pentecostal preacher, now atheist. Thanks for joining us today, Jerry.
And who do we have coming next week?
Next week we have Lori Hodgson of Scientology. So check us out on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and
that's it. And also, I think
read your Bible.
We might even have a Sickness hip hop artist come and join us as well. Thank you for watching.